It was supposed to be a routine flight, a standard journey between two cities, nothing unusual, nothing out of place. The aircraft took off on time, with experienced pilots and a full crew on board. Passengers settled into their seats, some preparing to sleep, others watching the dim glow of cabin lights fade into the darkness outside. Everything about the flight followed normal procedures. Weather conditions were stable, communication with air traffic control remained consistent, and there were no signs of technical issues. From every measurable perspective, this was a completely ordinary flight. But what happened during those hours in the air would later become one of the most disturbing aviation mysteries ever discussed. Inside the cockpit, the pilots maintained steady control of the aircraft. Their voices were calm, their communication clear. Instrument panels displayed stable readings, and navigation systems functioned without error. Routine updates were sent and received, confirming that everything was proceeding as expected. There was no indication of stress, no unusual signals, and no deviation from the flight plan. The calm professionalism of the cockpit environment suggested that nothing out of the ordinary was taking place. Yet, as the flight continued, something began to change, something that would not immediately register on any instrument. In the cabin, the atmosphere was quiet. Most passengers had settled into a rhythm of rest, conversation, or quiet observation. The hum of the engines created a steady background sound, familiar and almost comforting. Flight attendants moved through the aisle occasionally, checking on passengers and ensuring everything remained in order. Nothing appeared unusual. Yet beneath this calm surface, something subtle was beginning to shift. It was not immediately visible, not something that could be easily identified, but it was there, slowly emerging, unnoticed by those on board. Air traffic control monitored the flight as part of routine operations. The aircraft remained on its designated path, maintaining altitude and speed without deviation. Communication logs showed no irregularities. Everything aligned with expectations. Controllers had no reason to be concerned. From their perspective, the flight was progressing normally. But in situations like this, normality can be misleading, because sometimes the most unusual events begin without any visible sign. As the aircraft moved through the night sky, the environment inside remained quiet. The cabin lights were dimmed, and most passengers were unaware of anything unusual. Outside, the sky stretched endlessly, with clouds reflecting faint moonlight. The isolation of the aircraft at high altitude created a sense of separation from the world below. It was a self-contained environment, moving through darkness, carrying dozens of lives within its structure. And yet, something inside that environment was beginning to change in a way that no one could yet understand. As the flight continued, the quiet inside the cabin deepened. Most passengers had fallen asleep, their breathing steady, their movements minimal. The cabin lights remained dim, casting soft shadows across rows of seats. Flight attendants reduced their activity, allowing the environment to settle into stillness. From the outside, nothing seemed unusual. Yet something within that stillness began to feel unnatural. The silence was not just calm, it was absolute. No shifting, no murmuring, no subtle movement that usually accompanies a full cabin. It was as if the normal background of human presence had faded entirely, leaving behind a stillness that felt out of place. One of the flight attendants noticed it first. A passenger seated near the middle of the cabin appeared completely still. At first, it seemed like normal sleep, but as she approached, something felt wrong. The stillness was too complete. There was no visible breathing, no subtle movement of the chest, no signs of waking. She paused, unsure of how to react. The situation did not match any routine scenario. It was not panic that followed, but confusion. A quiet uncertainty that began to spread as she moved further down the aisle, checking other passengers. As she continued down the aisle, the pattern became impossible to ignore. More passengers appeared the same, completely still, unresponsive, unchanged. The realization did not come all at once. It built slowly, step by step, as each observation confirmed the last. The normal signs of life were absent. The usual sounds of movement, breathing, or quiet conversation had disappeared. The cabin, filled with people, now felt empty in a way that could not be explained. The attendant called for assistance, her voice controlled but urgent. Something had happened, and it was affecting everyone on board. The message reached the cockpit quickly. The pilots listened carefully as the situation was described. At first, the report seemed impossible. A cabin full of passengers suddenly unresponsive, without warning or explanation? They checked the instruments again. Oxygen levels, pressure, and all environmental systems appeared normal. There were no alarms, no warnings, and no signs of malfunction. The aircraft itself continued to operate perfectly. The contrast between the stable systems and the situation in the cabin created a moment of disbelief. Something was happening that could not be measured or detected by the aircraft's systems. The pilots attempted to communicate with the cabin crew again, asking for confirmation. The response was the same. No movement, no response, no change. The situation was consistent across the entire cabin. Faced with uncertainty, the pilots made a decision. The flight would continue towards its destination while maintaining communication with ground control. There was no immediate procedure for a situation like this, no checklist for a cabin that had suddenly fallen silent without explanation. The absence of protocol made the situation even more complex. Air traffic control was informed of the situation, though the description itself was difficult to process. A fully operational aircraft with an unresponsive cabin was not something they had encountered before. They monitored the flight closely, maintaining communication with the pilots and preparing for any possible outcome. Yet from their perspective, the aircraft appeared completely normal. It maintained altitude, speed, and direction without deviation. The data showed stability, but the reality inside the aircraft told a different story. As the aircraft approached its destination, the sky began to brighten. The first light of morning illuminated the clouds below, creating a calm and almost peaceful scene. From the outside, nothing suggested that anything was wrong. The plane descended smoothly, following standard procedures. The contrast between the calm exterior and the unknown reality inside made the moment even more unsettling. It was a normal landing approach, carrying an abnormal reality. The aircraft landed without difficulty. The wheels touched the runway smoothly, and the plane slowed to a controlled stop. Ground crews prepared to receive what they believed was a routine arrival. There were no emergency signals, no visible damage, and no indication of distress. From the outside, the landing appeared completely normal. Yet inside, the situation remained unchanged. As ground crews approached the aircraft, they noticed the unusual stillness inside the cabin. Through the windows, passengers appeared motionless. There was no movement, no signs of activity. The normal process of disembarkation did not begin. Instead, a cautious approach replaced routine procedures. The situation required confirmation before any further action could be taken. When the aircraft door was opened, the silence inside became immediately noticeable. There were no voices, no movement, no reaction to the arrival. The cabin remained exactly as it had been during flight. Passengers sat in their seats, unchanged. The absence of response confirmed what had been reported. Something had happened during the flight, and it had affected everyone on board. Medical teams entered the cabin and began their assessment. Each passenger was checked carefully, but the results were consistent. There were no signs of external injury, no visible cause, and no immediate explanation. The uniformity of the situation made it even more difficult to understand. Investigators examined every aspect of the aircraft. Systems, equipment, and environmental controls were analyzed in detail. Nothing indicated failure. The aircraft had functioned exactly as designed. Attention turned to possible environmental factors. Air quality, pressure levels, and oxygen supply were all tested. Each result confirmed the same conclusion. Conditions had remained within safe limits. The absence of a clear cause led to speculation. Various theories were considered, each attempting to explain what had happened, yet none could fully account for the evidence. The case remained open, with no definitive conclusion. The lack of explanation became the most significant aspect of the event. Over time, the story spread, becoming one of the most unusual aviation mysteries ever discussed. The aircraft landed safely, the systems worked perfectly, and yet the result remained the same.
It was a cold night when a traveler arrived at a small, aging hotel located on a quiet street. The building looked ordinary from the outside, with a few dim lights glowing through its windows. Rain fell steadily and the streets were almost completely empty. The traveler had been driving for hours and was simply looking for a place to rest. When he stepped inside, the lobby was quiet, almost too quiet. There was no music, no background noise, just a faint sound of rain hitting the windows. At the front desk stood a receptionist who barely spoke, handing over a key without asking many questions. Everything felt normal, yet something about the atmosphere seemed slightly off. The receptionist avoided eye contact and spoke in a low, almost distant tone. When the traveler asked how long the hotel had been open, the receptionist paused briefly before answering in a vague manner. It was as if the question itself was unexpected. The key that was handed over was old, attached to a heavy metal tag with a number engraved on it. There was nothing unusual about the object itself, but the traveler noticed that the number seemed unfamiliar, almost out of sequence compared to the other room numbers listed behind the desk. Before he could ask more questions, the receptionist simply pointed toward the hallway and told him where to go. The hallway leading to the rooms was long and dimly lit. The lights flickered slightly, casting shifting shadows across the walls. The carpet beneath his feet was worn, and each step echoed more loudly than expected. As he walked deeper into the corridor, the hotel seemed unnaturally quiet. No doors opened, no voices could be heard, and there were no signs of other guests. The numbers on the doors passed by in sequence, but something felt wrong. The deeper he went, the more isolated he felt, as if the hallway itself stretched farther than it should have. When he finally reached his room, he hesitated before opening the door. The door creaked softly as he pushed it open. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a single lamp. The air felt colder than expected, and there was a faint smell that he couldn't identify. The furniture was old but neatly arranged, as if it had been prepared recently. Everything appeared normal at first glance, yet something about the space felt wrong. It was not a visible detail, but rather a subtle feeling, as if the room did not belong in the same building. He stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind him, unaware that this decision would lead to something he would never fully understand. As he looked around the room, he noticed small details that seemed out of place. The mirror on the wall reflected the room, but the angle appeared slightly distorted. The curtains moved gently, even though the window was closed. The silence inside the room was different from